Good morning. So today I have an entrepreneur with us who is Yasmin. She is wonderful. She is the chief of staff of a company named Shift Technologies, which is currently paving the road towards success. Let's welcome Yasmin on 10 Minutes of Hiding Wisdom, where she will tell us about where she's currently working, what she's doing, and the things that she has learned along the way. Hi, Yasmin. How are you doing?
Hi, nice to meet you, Anal.
Nice to meet you. Go ahead.
So I'm currently at Shift. We're an e-commerce marketplace platform for used cars, which I think is a really exciting opportunity for myself. Started out as an energy engineer at Stanford and worked a little bit in finance, so was able to kind of combine my interest in fuel efficiency and car and mobility overall with a finance background, kind of helping us build our strategy and our financial planning within the company. And we've experienced triple digit growth and went public, with a SPAC in 2020, which was an incredible opportunity for me, kind of just having such breadth of experiences at a young age. And, I'm extremely passionate about helping people to figure out their careers and pivot, or maybe, kind of launch their careers at a higher level throughout different educational backgrounds, and just, for people in general who are struggling to figure out how to navigate the current pandemic and the environment. So happy to kind of answer any questions that
Of course.
people have.
Just to give you an idea, when I reached out to Yasmin, she was kind enough that she wanted to make a slideshow for all of us, but sadly we can't really share screens, but she definitely has a lot of insight. So Yasmin, because you've done so much research, you're so into helping people for the pandemic and everything, can you maybe guide people who are seeking for jobs in the market? How should they approach the job market? What would make them stand? What would differentiate themselves amongst thousands of other applicants that are applying? Just any tips that you have for people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of went through this myself in the earlier stage of my career when I was still figuring out what I want to do in this life. But something that, I feel extremely lucky and privileged about is that I had the opportunity to figure all of that out before the pandemic. And so for people who are seeking jobs right now, I think the pandemic actually affected the most vulnerable communities that benefited the most from the in-person interaction, right? When we think about people who really don't have connections in the tech industry or in the industry they're trying to break into, I'm talking about recent grads, international students, right? Kind of underrepresented communities without a huge network in the place where they're trying to break into. The in-person meetings and networking sessions helped a lot. And so right now, campuses are opening up, but it's still not the same. You still don't have 100 events per week that you could go attend in the Bay Area and meet a bunch of people. And people are less open grabbing coffee casually like they used to before because of the safety precautions and everything. And so I think that the mindset that you have to turn is kind of turn it upside down and think about it, that if people aren't meeting in person now, well, what are they doing, right? They're spending a lot of time at home and at their computers and their phones, way more than they have before. My screen time kind of like doubled over the course of the pandemic because you're always on your phone, you're always online, you're always checking something on your digital devices because that's the replacement of the medium of how we used to communicate before. And so the way that I would approach, job hunting and just overall career development is a two-step process. So the first process would be think about how do you even get an interview, right? A lot of times that's hard. It was a struggle for me, no matter what university you go into or anywhere, it's always hard. And online applications alone, sometimes they work out, right? Like I have friends who applied online and worked out for them. It was not the process for me. And so I think with everyone being on their phones and their computers right now, first step, okay, just get to the interview stage, get past that milestone, and then I'll talk about how to handle the interviews itself. So speaking of getting to the interview stage, if you have a company or an industry that you're really interested in, certainly apply online. Like, maybe there are companies with really efficient recruiting cycles that will reply to you quickly, but most of the time that's not the case. We know, all of those stories that, people apply to 200 jobs, don't get a response. So number one, scrub your LinkedIn network. Scrub your LinkedIn network as much as you can. If you don't have someone in your network, look at your connections and then see what are the connections that they have and try to facilitate an introduction. For those who sometimes, like I've had instances where I didn't have someone who was working at a specific place. And so what I did is just cold emailing. And cold emailing is not I call it warm emailing, if anything, or warm messaging, because you can't cold message someone. If it's someone who's receiving multiple messages per day, you have to think about, what is the ROI for them and replying to you. And so my strategy is twofold. One, you need to make sure that the message you send is highly personalized and is, finding some commonality or something interesting in the background that you connect over, whether it's like some nonprofit or some organization, volunteering you've done in the past, or maybe from the same hometown, same university, whatever, just a very typical things. And what I call is kind of like going the next level is when you can show that you're actually doing the job before getting the job. So let's say you're like a product manager, or you're a marketing strategist. Go download their app, check out their website, figure something out where there's a gap of opportunity, and just quickly in like a 2-3 sentence high level highlight an opportunity for them, and just show that you're already bringing value before really being there. If you're applying for a VC role, my good mentor gave me this advice a long time ago in venture capital, right? The sourcing companies, that's like a really big thing. So provide a company that may be interesting for that fund, that's very accretive to their portfolio. You're already showing initiatives, you're already showing that you're capable of doing the job before you're actually in the job. So, I think that if you can do it in a way that someone can read it in 1 minute, that message, and really get them interested, you will have an interview guaranteed in a way that's going to accelerate you past, the online recruiting cycle and the traditional kind of way of doing things. So that's a
Okay.
little bit about the interview itself, or how to get to the interview. Um, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
The next
sure.
step. Would love to hear
Yeah, and
that.
so as we get to the interview, then we have to still go through the traditional process, right? And so I obviously can't capture all the different interview process and how I advise interviewing for different positions, but what I can say is that you also have to keep in mind that the interviewing process right now, if you do it over Zoom, is very different from doing it in person, right? People's attention spans are very different. When you're in person, at least for me, like I'm an extrovert, I'm a very like people's person. For me, it was really difficult to start like talking to people who were in office with me like a couple weeks ago over Zoom. And so, let alone if you're talking to someone who is you never met before and they're just your interviewer, you don't have like that chit chat time. You don't have like the walking time, kind of like to gauge them, get their vibe. So I think the key point is like making sure that you start off like understanding the person's like their cadence of speaking, how they ask questions, and adjust to that. So that's the first step. The second step is in interviews, it used to be really easy to explain what your past experience is, because you could use the drawing board, you could sketch something on paper, and that's not the case anymore. So when you're conveying something about your past experience and how you've done things, in your previous job or some projects you did in grad school or undergrad, whatever, just the way I think about it, like there's some people that provide those in interviews, but they don't set the context. They don't set the stage. They don't really explain things. They just jump kind of like, oh, I did this really complex analysis, but I don't really understand why. So the way I kind of think about it, and I advise my friends and mentees that think of like, a project as a food recipe. Right. So like you're going to go and like you're going to cut the potatoes and you're going to cut up some chicken and you're going to do this in a step by step way. And so the way that just think of that framework in the same way as cooking something, where you are explaining things in a very kind of like meticulous but also logical way, in a way that you would convey a recipe to your friend. So I think that's kind of the main way that I would say, during the interviews, like those are the key focal points. And the last one I would say is for more analytical jobs, right? Like we don't have paper assessment tools or anything anymore. So make sure, like, as you're getting on the interview, whatever the tool you're using, right, have it handy, have it open, have it like ready to go, so that in the middle of the interview, there's no like that friction time of like, oh, I don't have Excel ready, let me like open it up, because you're already like, it's the small things that make you like look so prepared and polished. And if your computer is freezing, like mine was earlier today, right, like you don't get all frazzled, right? Clearly I can't apply my own advice to myself, but kind of that's the takeaway, right? Like have it the computational part ready to go so that you are not getting flustered and getting emotional in the middle of the interview.
Okay, well, these were very useful for me as well, Yasmin. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's very useful, specifically how you mentioned that, like at first you used to be able to draw it, and then that made me think, why don't we share our screen when we're actually trying to highlight something on a resume? Because I think the visual appeal at the end of the day is so important, and just go making sure that the hiring manager is with you along every step that you're mentioning is something that's so important, and I could definitely apply these tips myself. So thank you so much. It's definitely I could definitely see you've done your research, you're willing to help people, and it's great to see that people like you still exist who want to give back. And Yasmin, thank you so much for coming on this show. We like to keep things short, but other than that, it was an absolute pleasure having you as a guest. And considering Shift Technologies has an amazing, inspiring person like you, I'm pretty sure the company will continue to grow and prosper.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for your kind word. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure. And if I can help in any other way, please let me know.